Good evening and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today. The Startup and Innovation Cell of Nest Wadia College of Commerce is pleased to present the second webinar in its series on self-reliance and entrepreneurship. On behalf of the Startup Cell and its core committee members, I wish everyone an enjoyable learning experience and fruitful interaction today. It is my pleasure to introduce Ujjwal Gulati, a techie turned self taught artist and mindfulness coach, as our speaker this evening. In 2016-17, he gave up a decade long career in IT and embarked on deeply introspective journey of self discovery, during which he got down to art, meditation, and other healing practices to manage the stress and anxiety that accompanied this life-altering decisions. Through his own self-healing process, he grew increasingly interested in the science and psychology of mindfulness, self-awareness, and emotional awareness. He became intrigued by the functioning of the human mind and discovered a keen interest in understanding the correlation between childhood conditioning, past experiences, emotional triggers, and behavioral patterns. This harmonious emergence of art and healing inspired Ujjwal to help others authentically reconnect with themselves by transforming their unconsciousness into consciousness. To fulfill this inspiration, he founded a program called Mindfulness with Mandalas, which he describes as an experiential creative meditation program that enables people to become more self aware and better aligned with their emotions and their overall inner experience. Ujjwal has since hosted several workshops and private one on one coaching sessions, including many sessions at corporate and co working spaces. He intends to further explore the corporate wellness and employee engagement space with the primary goal of assisting corporates in their efforts towards helping employees maintain optimum level of mental well-being. He also hopes to contribute to the expansion of mindfulness and awareness program in the education space and has already conducted a pilot workshop at one of Bangalore's premier universities. On behalf of the college, I welcome Ujjwal Gulati and request him to take over the session. Before he begins, I would like to remind you all that we are using a free version of Zoom. If the session ends in between, so please use the same link to join us back. Over to you, Ujjwal.
Thank you so much, Dhruv. Thank you for this mention. Just a point on the Zoom session ending. So about halfway through my presentation, I'll of course tell you at what point. But there's an exercise where I'm going to hand it over to everyone. There'll be about a 5-minute period where you guys will be writing down something. So I mentioned to Rohan as well. We'll be utilizing that time to log off and log back, so that we don't waste another 2-3 minutes later on. So I'll point out when that phase comes in. I'm about to share my screen. Let me know if you see it. Is this visible?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. So before I even introduce my session to you, I have a quick little exercise plan. So I request you to pick up your pen and papers. This is a very quick one. It should take probably more than a minute. So on the next screen, you're going to see a question, and I want you to write down the first thing that comes to mind without judging your answer, without trying to change it, without thinking much about it. Literally, the first thing that pops into your mind is your right answer. And here is your question. What color represents your current feeling and state of mind? So, in other words, think of what you're feeling at the moment and think of a color that best represents that feeling and just write it down. And for the purpose of this exercise, let's try and have it limited to these 10 base colors. You might, there's 9 visible, but right next to the black, if you pay close attention, there's a little gray box to sort of differentiate that white. It's a white background, so you may not be able to tell white separately, but essentially they are these 10 base colors. So if you, for example, if you think of, for whatever reason, if maroon popped up in your mind, you're probably more inclined to a red. But if you have something like a magenta, try and pick between like a pink or a purple. That's literally as simple as this exercise is. Don't try and think of it, or is it my favorite color? This does not have to be your favorite color. It's literally the first color that popped up in your mind. That's all. And I'm assuming everyone has their answer, so I'm going to move on. This should not have taken longer than that. So now is when I'll introduce the session to you. Thank you again, Dr. Mariam, for inviting me here for this session today. Really excited to talk to you guys. Um, I was invited to share my story. You know, I switched from psychology background to more of a creative pursuit. But I didn't want to just limit this session to just me sharing my story. I didn't want to make it all about my story. I also wanted to have you take away something more than just my background and where I come from. Right? So I wanted to focus on what I've learned over the last couple of years, and I wanted to share that with you. And that's why I decided to focus the crux of this session around um, purpose and self-awareness. So we're going to be talking about career interest specifically, but more in general as well. Just overall, the importance and significance of purpose and self-awareness in basically choosing everything that you're involved in your life. So before I jump in, the one thing I will point out is I'm well aware that I may have had certain experiences which may have caused a certain shift in perspective, which you may not have had yet. So instead of expecting you to fully understand where I'm coming from, because, like I said, you may not have had those experiences. So instead of expecting you to fully be aware of what I mean when I say these things, I'm going to attempt to talk to you from the position that you're in, so that you can relate more, you can understand my perspective a little bit better. So that's going to be my attempt. I'm going to the best of my ability. I'm going to try and do that throughout the session here, and I hope that you can find this relatable. Awesome. So moving on, I think I have 2 slides there. So exercise 1 is pretty much done. So I'm going to be sharing my story with you guys a little bit, just touching upon the background and how I got to where I am today. I will be talking about the biggest learnings and discoveries that I've had in the last couple of years. Exercise 2 is where this is, I would say, the most sort of critical part of this entire chat that we're having today. And it's a fun sort of creative way of sort of taking a peek into your mind. It's an interesting exercise, pretty interactive, and it's hopefully it'll be eye-opening. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe self-awareness is so critical, and another quick little exercise similar to the first one we just did, and then a little wrap-up session before we open up for Q&A at the end. And I would request, of course, all along you may have questions pop up in your mind. Please take note of it, and by all means, I'm going to try and get to as many of them as I can towards the end. But unless it's a very specific point related to the slide that we're discussing, I would request you to save questions for the last part of the discussion. Awesome. So let's jump in. So I wanted to share, more than just the last couple of years leading to, where I am just, after I made the switch in IT. I want to touch upon literally all the way back to my childhood and my growing years. And you'll know in a few minutes why I choose to do this in this particular way. So I come from a traditional North Indian family, very sort of straightforward, default upbringing in terms of, your definitions of what is success, what is failure, um, the importance of money, the importance of living that sort of standard path towards success. Get a good degree, go to college, get a good degree, good job, get married, have kids, family, whatever. That's the tradition, very very traditional Indian sort of thought process. I come from just one of those North Indian families. But in terms of my personality as a child, I was a massive introvert. I had absolutely zero confidence. I lived my life believing I didn't have a voice, because I was in a way conditioned to think that way. I was a super obedient kid. Um, I did everything that was expected of me, including the decision to, take up science when I got to the 11th grade and then engineering when I got to college. So including the sort of career choice, even that was predetermined for me, and it was drilled into my head that there's no other choice. So it was very obvious that was the path that I was going to walk. Um, I always had a creative streak in me. I used to, as kids, I'm sure many of you guys did it as well, but I used to, at the back of our school books and notebooks, I used to draw random things. But beyond just that, I also used to, I remember just having these random visions of just building stuff, right? Just not just in terms of arts and crafts, but just applying my creativity to different things. I always had that, but I never believed that it was something that one could actually pursue in terms of career, right? Like I said, for me, it was the path was set. It was engineering, and that was that. There was no choice. So, that's the background I came from, and essentially, in my extended sort of family setup, school teachers, friends of like the close, family friends. There was literally, absolutely nobody that I could look up to. I didn't have role models. I didn't have, any mentors growing up. There was nobody who I could sort of adore in that way and say, okay, this person, the way they live their life, the way they carry themselves, I really want to be like that. There was none of that, right? So it was just, again, a very sort of plain, straightforward, standard, by default upbringing. Right. Fast forward a few years. So when I got to college, like I said, engineering was a choice that was already made for me. I went to the US for college. I went to Purdue. Electrical engineering was my major, but I actually, it was um, it was tough. And I've mentioned here I strongly dislike that because I don't like using the word hate. I think hate is a very strong, harsh word. But to be very honest, I genuinely hated it. I it was not my cup of tea, but I still, of course, I went through it. Right, I went through my 5 years college, finished, college, and I got my degree. I worked in IT for 10 years, a bunch of different roles within IT, a bunch of different companies. Again, absolutely hated that line of work. Not that there's anything wrong with IT as a field of work. I truly believe, there's just because I didn't connect with something, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that field. We need people working in all sorts of fields. We need somebody working in IT. We need lawyers. We need people doing all sorts of different things for the world. So forth. It's just that I didn't connect to that field, and that I knew it was temporary in the sense that I knew someday I would want to give it up. I just didn't know what that someday meant. Like, what does it mean to think that someday I'm going to give up my job and try and do something of my own? What was that temporary? I didn't know that. It was just, I just had this very strong desire that at some point in my life, I'm going to walk away from this. And finally, I had to sort of pull the plug. It was around 2016, 17 when I decided to just, dive in. And this was not even, I didn't make this decision with a backup plan in mind. Right? I had no backup. It was just one of those. It, I just had enough of what I was doing, and it was driving me up the wall, and I just had to give it up to maintain my sanity. So I kind of gave up my career in 16, 17, and that was that. That was that chapter closed. Now you must be wondering why am I sharing this level of detail, specifically early childhood and things like that. The reason for that is I want to highlight a few things which I think will be relatable in some way and are important to this discussion. Um, I didn't have the least bit of self-awareness growing up. I didn't know what it meant beyond. Um, to me, self-awareness meant knowing what you like and knowing what you dislike, like at a very, very surface level, superficial level, right? But it's way beyond that. Just knowing I like doing this and I don't like doing that, that's really not self-awareness. It's a lot deeper than that, right? And I had absolutely no idea what it meant anything beyond that. Even up until my early 30s, I'm not only talking about childhood, right? I was, like I mentioned earlier, I was heavily conditioned. There were the way I was brought up, the way my family was, and my extended sort of setup. We all have that, right? We have our immediate family, of course, our teachers who've had most influence on us. Then maybe, some of us have We have close-knit families that are large, like joint families or large set of cousins, and then so we all have that extended setup, and each of these little subunits have some sort of an influence on us. For me, it was a very conditioned environment, and I grew up believing certain things based on what was passed on to me. Right? Everything was done by default. There was no conscious sort of there was no it was not a conscious parenting setup, and by that I'm not trying to undermine my parents' efforts. I think I've reached a stage where I now understand a lot of our parents a lot of us who experience these sort of emotions about how we're brought up. It's not always necessarily a parent's fault. It's just even they are unaware. Right? They also probably had that default parenting, default upbringing, so that's what they end up passing along. And so it's not their fault. It's just it's a reality that I've just come to become aware of, and it's just part of my truth now. So it's completely okay for me to acknowledge that I was raised in a very default environment. Uh, and if it's not hasn't been obvious so far, just kind of making it clear, calling it out of here. Majority of my life was not my choice. It was everything just sort of happened, and I was put into these boxes, and I was told to do these things, and I just followed the instructions, and none of it was my choice. Like it was just things were happening for me, and I was just flowing along. I never really had it in me to sort of stand up and question what was happening. Um, and now to sort of fast forward to the last couple of years, which is after I gave up, my IT career, what happened then? So the first several months after I closed that chapter on my career, I spent a lot of time, in dealing with heavy stress and anxiety. As you'd understand, right? I just gave up a 10-year career. There's suddenly no paycheck coming in anymore. Right? There's all these heavy emotions that you would deal with if you're in that situation. I was very confused as to what I'm going to do. It was a period where I had really no option but to sort of travel inward and go through this deep introspective journey. A lot of self-exploration, a lot of self-discovery. And around that time, in order to manage my emotion, in order to manage my sort of mental state of being, I came across meditation and mindfulness practices for the first time in my life. And I started to explore them just to see how they could help me, right? How I could leverage these practices in order to sort of feel better about my situation, I guess, to start with, but also, over a period of time, just learn how to manage my emotions. And one thing led to another, and somehow very organically, art sort of re-emerged in my life. Like I was saying earlier, as a kid, I used to just draw random things at the back of my books, but I never had a type of art. I never considered myself an artist. So art just out of nowhere emerged after all these years, probably a couple of decades. And at first, it came very organically as just another, sort of healing practice, right? A therapeutic, calming experience. When I was very stressed, I would try and just pick up my sketch pad and draw something. But eventually, I realized, because I was still in that phase of figuring out what do I want to do in terms of my career, like what profession do I want to get into? Because at some point, I have to sort of restart my life and start making money again, right? So I realized I guess I was half decent at the art that I was creating, and a lot of my friends and family sort of pushed me. So I very unexpectedly sort of made this decision to start pursuing art professionally. And a few months later, I decided to start sharing my practice with people around me, and because I realized, just like me, there's so many others. There's thousands, maybe millions of people who go through these stressful situations in their own way. Everyone deals with stress and anxiety in their own way, but everyone deals with it, right? Everyone has their reasons of feeling stressful and anxious. So I wanted to share these practices with people, and that's when I founded my workshop program called Mindfulness with Mandalas, which is essentially a creative meditation program, where I leverage the art of mandala creation to sort of I promote it as an alternative form of meditation. So this basically helps those people who may understand the idea of meditation but find it really difficult. Like conventional meditation is pretty difficult for most people. So here's a practice that leads you to the same state of mind, but in a much more light and fun and creative way. So that was the intention behind this program, and of course it has art involved in it. And since I newly sort of entered art as a profession, I combined the two, and this was around June 2018. So it's been a little over 2 years, and I've done a bunch of sessions offline before the lockdown hit, and ever since we got into lockdown, I've been doing online sessions, and so that's how that sort of journey progressed. Um, and during this time, of course, like I mentioned, I've had a lot of time to really sort of go deep within and understand, who I'm all about, what have I, learned in the last not just couple of years, but during this time of self-discovery, a lot of my past, sort of came to the surface, and there's of course way too many learnings and discoveries, too many to list in one slide, and probably to even talk about in one full hour. But I just wanted to highlight a few of them, which I think again are some of the most key ones, according to me, in my experience, and I think you'd find them relatable. That's why I'm specifically mentioning these. The first one, just going to get it out of the way. I think most of us have got it wrong in terms of not just, and when I say most of us, I'm literally, I guess I'm not only talking about, most parents or most Indians, and in general, like humanity around the world. I believe people seriously lack awareness. Everyone has, for most of the time, we've lived a very default life. Um, Everyone lives somebody else's dreams. Everyone goes through, we create these imaginary, unnecessary checklists in our head. College, check. Good job, or as the best job possible, check. Get married, check. Have kids, check. Start a family, check. Take care of your parents, check. So it's a very mechanical process, right? And most people end up living that mechanical process, which I, through my sort of understanding of who I am, I discovered that's actually, um, we're really undermining our potential and our power as human beings when we live a life like that. But that's just how it's been for a very, very long time. And I think now I do believe that there is a shift, on the horizon, but it's still slow. But at least there's hope, right? That consciousness is sort of spreading, and people are slowly becoming aware. But so far, it's been pretty. Um, it's been very slow. Let's just put it that way. And we've always given money this importance that I think I don't want to say it doesn't deserve that importance. Money is important. Don't get me wrong. Uh, but we've given it more importance than our passions, our purpose, our things that really interest us, things that really excite us, or things that make us happy and give us true joy. Whether that's career or hobbies or interests or whatever it is. We've always there's this default mindset of money is the goal, right? And that takes me to that next point. Each of us, I now believe that each of us has a purpose, and money is not that purpose. Money is, the best way I can explain this is, money is what happens to you when when you consciously invest your time and energy in things that you truly enjoy, things that you find meaningful, things that you really things that you do for the world or the people or the planet that leave a positive impact. Right? Money is what comes to you while you're doing those things. It's not so it's not the end goal. It's just a means to make things happen. That's how I've now come to look at money, and this mindset suits me a lot more than what I used to have, which was again a very fixed mindset of, oh, money is the end goal, and everything you do is with that goal of earning as much money as possible. So that was sort of part of my recent learning. And the last part here, not only does each of us have a purpose for being here, I also believe each of us knows what our purpose is. The only difference for most people will be, some of us, well, maybe very few people know it consciously, meaning we're consciously aware of what our purpose is. But for everyone else, we're aware of it at a subconscious level, and so we have to do that little bit of extra work. I shouldn't say a little bit; it's actually a lot of work, but it requires that extra bit of effort to understand what their purpose is, right? Um, so for most people, it is subconscious, but there are a few people who might be consciously aware of what their purpose is. Um, so that brings me to the second exercise, which is, like I said, this is going to be the crux of this discussion today, and this is around purpose discovery.
Okay, so we're going to end in 2 minutes. So the meeting is going to end on its own.
Oh,
So we'll
already?
have to join again. Yes.
Hasn't it been like half an hour?
40 minutes is going to finish soon.